All right, we're doing Bhagavad Gita, chapter 2, shloka 11, verse 11. What we're going to do is we're going to read the verse, and I'm going to give you my translation. I just published on Amazon. It's out on Amazon, Kindle and paperback. A new translation of the Bhagavad Gita. I'm calling it a new translation for students because it really focuses on the Sanskrit. If you want to learn Sanskrit, even if you don't want to learn Sanskrit, I think it has a very good English translation. The English translation is as faithful as possible to the actual language of the Gita, without importing ideas or concepts that aren't really there in the actual words. And yeah, so and this is I'm doing this video also for a brother here on the Big Island, Will, who sent me something about this verse, and we're going to hopefully get clear about what the verse actually says. Keep in mind that no translation is ever perfect, and we could really go very deeply into each word in particular, but we're not going to do that just for purposes of time or the interest of time. So let's read the verse, and then we'll go through about 18 different translations, okay? So here we go. śhrī-bhagavān uvācha aśhochyān-anvaśhochas-tvaṁ prajñā-vādānśh bhāṣhase gatāsūn-agatāsūnśh-cha nānuśhochanti pandits. The Blessed One said. So Bhagavan, śhrī-bhagavān, Krishna, the Blessed One. That's how I translate it. The Blessed One said, you have mourned those who should not be mourned. While speaking words of wisdom, the wise grieve neither for the living nor for the dead. Okay, let's go through the Sanskrit. You have mourned anvaśhocha-tvaṁ. Tvam is you, anvaśhocha is mourned. You have mourned those who should not be mourned, aśhochyā. So that means those people who not to be mourned. Whenever you have it negates what comes after, aśhochyā. While speaking words of wisdom, prajñā-vādān is words of wisdom. Prajñā. What's the difference between jnana and prajñā? That would be one question that we could ask, is because prajñā is actually not used too much. Jnana is used very often in the Gita. It's one of the most used words in the whole Gita is this word jnana, which means wisdom or knowledge. But here, prajñā is used. So that would be an interesting thing to look at that very closely. It's actually the same root. It shares the same root as jnana, has the J and A. Cha is and, bhāṣhase. So it really is, you have mourned those who should not be mourned and speaking words of wisdom. Bhāṣhase is speaking, right? Bhāṣhase, you speak, you say words of wisdom. All right, and then the wise, pandits, grieve neither for the living, agatāsūn, anuśhochanti, nor for the dead, gatāsūn-cha. It's really and for the dead, but I can understand why it would be nor. People translate it as nor for the dead. Not for the living, not for the dead. They lament, they grieve, they mourn, they do not mourn. All right, so there's a lot here. There's a lot that we could talk about. First of all, is mourn the best word? Maybe you have grieved is even better. You're grieving those who should not be grieved for, right? mourn, maybe it's not the best word. I have to rethink that, because mourning is generally for people that are dead, right? And here, Arjuna is he mourning, or is he even grieving? Might not be the best word. Lament might be a better word. You are lamenting those who should not be lamented. All right. And speaking words of wisdom. It says and. It doesn't say while. I have while, but that might not be the best translation either. I had while seemingly speaking words of wisdom, but it does not say seemingly. It does not say that you seem to speak words of wisdom. Krishna is acknowledging that he's speaking words of wisdom. And then you have this word pandita. No, a pandit is not necessarily a wise person. Pandits are knowledgeable. But in this case, it seems to be saying the wise, right? It seems to be suggesting that this is a wise person, knows that you neither grieve for the living nor for the dead. I think I'm going to keep it at grieve. Although I'm gonna look into that more. So there's the main issue here is first of all, what's the meaning of the verse? Is Krishna acknowledging that Arjuna is speaking words of wisdom? Is he saying you are speaking, what you're saying is actually wisdom? But then he's contradicting that. He's saying, but this is not wise. Right? You're grieving. So he's saying, I think what he's saying is that you are speaking words of wisdom, but you're in a state of grief. And because you're in a state of grief, you're really actually not wise, right? You're not acting as a wise person. You may be saying some good things, but you're not in a state of wisdom. This is actually a very important verse. If we could really go deep into this, and I think we're going to go deep into this with this video, but I think it gets down to, it's easy to say stuff, right? It's easy to say things that sound good, right? That sound pretty right, or pretty right on. But when it comes down to actually living it or embodying it is a different thing. And I think what Krishna is getting at here is that Arjuna, you're not there yet, right? You're not in that place. You can't understand what this is, right? That's why seemingly speaking words of wisdom is good, but it's not what it says. I mean, you could read that into it, but it's not exactly what it says. It says, you have mourned those who should not be mourned, and speaking words of wisdom. And the wise grieve neither for the living nor for the dead. All right. We'll come back to this. Let's see what Winthrop Sargent says. I've based my translation mainly on him. I take him as the gold standard. He has the blessed Lord spoke. He uses Lord. I would rather not use Lord. I like blessed one. You have mourned those that should not be mourned. So he uses mourned. And you speak words as if with wisdom. Now, does not say as if. Does not say as if. So he's reading it into a little bit. He's explaining what it probably wants to say, but it doesn't say it. And you speak as if with wisdom. The wise do not mourn for the dead or for the living. So he uses mourn, mourn, mourn. He uses the word mourn. Short and sweet. It's good, you know. I'm not sure if the mourn is the right word though, but we'll come back to that. Okay, let's see what other people have. Swami Shivananda, also one of the great translations. Thou hast grieved for those that should not be grieved for, yet thou speakest words of wisdom. So he adds a yet there, right? There's no yet, unless you understand cha as yet, but cha is usually and. So he is acknowledging, Krishna is saying, you speak words of wisdom. The wise grieve neither for the living nor for the dead. All right. It's good. He's using grieve, not mourn. So I might change it to grieve, because I think grieve is, because he's not really mourning, because no one is dead yet, right? No one has died. So mourn might not be the best word. Swami Nikalananda. The Lord said, he only has the Lord. The Lord said, you have been mourning for those who should not be mourned for, yet you speak words of wisdom. Neither for the living nor for the dead do the wise grieve. I think Nikalananda was using Shivananda's translation, and you can see some similarities, but he uses mourned. This is actually closer to what I have and what Winthrop Sargent has. He uses the word mourn. But he does have the yet you speak words of wisdom, which is almost exactly what Shivananda has. He might have used it, right? Generally, if someone has almost exactly the same or the exact same thing as someone else, they probably borrowed from that person, or someone who borrowed from that person, right? Ek not aśhochyān. You speak sincerely, but your sorrow has no cause. The wise grieve neither for the living nor for the dead. So he's paraphrasing. He's explaining the difficulty. He's saying that Krishna is acknowledging that he's being sincere. He's acknowledging to Arjuna, listen, you are speaking some good things. You have some good things that you're saying here. And yet, you don't understand, right? Your sorrow has no cause. The wise grieve neither for living nor for the dead. No, it's a paraphrase. It's not exact translation. He's also changing around the word order. But it's aśhochyān, he's got a great translation. He's got one of the best, I think next to the Bhagavad Gita as it is, maybe his is the most popular in the world today, which says a lot. You go on Amazon, his translation is up there. Bhagavad Gita as it is, though, has literally sold millions of copies. I'm not sure if you can say the same for any other translation of the Gita. Maybe Eswaran's version has sold 1 million copies. That'd be interesting to look into. Juan Mascara, I'm glad that I found him. He actually was the translation I read originally. The first translation I read of the Gita was Juan Mascara, and he has a very nice translation. So what does he say? Thy tears are for those beyond tears, and are thy words words of wisdom? It's a question. He's saying this is a question, right? Are thy words words of wisdom? It's an interesting solution, because there's no exclamation points, or there's no punctuation in the Gita. You have to add that. You have to add commas. You have to add colons. You have to add semicolons. None of that is there. So thy tears are for those beyond tears, and are thy words words of wisdom? The wise grieve not for those who live, and they grieve not for those who die. For life and death shall pass away. I have to read him again, because I think he uses a lot of biblical language, and that is definitely, for life and death shall pass away, is like Jesus in the Gospels, right? Like, Jesus says to his disciples, or he said, Sermon on the Mount, I forget, maybe it's in Matthew, where he says, night and day will pass away, but my words will not pass away, right? It's not bad though, because the Sanskrit could be read that way. It's like not going and going. It's agatāsūn and gatāsūn. So it's kind of nice. He has a nice solution to the problem with that one. You're speaking words of wisdom, and he just makes it into a question. Are you speaking words of wisdom? Because you're not. Because the wise do not grieve. All right, next one, Radhakrishnan, who also has one of the great translations. Thou grievest for those whom thou shouldst not grieve for, and yet thou speakest words about wisdom. Wise men do not grieve for the dead or for the living. So he has the and yet you speak, right? So you grieve for those who should not be grieved for, and yet you speak words of wisdom. So it's the dichotomy between, you're speaking words of wisdom, but you're doing something unwise. So he has grieve. Radhakrishnan has grieve. He's not using mourn. He's using grieve throughout. 3 grieves, no mourns. Swami Gambhirananda also has a great translation. You have grieved for those who are not to be grieved for, and you speak words that are fit to be uttered by the wise! Exclamation point. The wise do not grieve for the departed and those who have not departed. So he's saying, you're speaking words that really a wise person should say. It's kind of a backhanded compliment the way he's doing it here, right? It's like, you're not wise, but you're speaking words of wisdom, but you're not wise. All of these are, just a little bit, have a little variety here, some different approaches. But Swami Gambhirananda, he uses the word grieved. Pandita is wise. Everyone has wise for pandita, right? Or wise men. The wise, the wise, the wise. Everyone is translating that word as wise. Wise men or wise. Mahadev Desai, who wrote the Gita according to Gandhi, thou mournest for them who thou should not mourn, and utterest vain words of wisdom. So the vain is an addition, right? He's trying to explain what it should say, right? It should say not words of wisdom, but vain words of wisdom. But that's not there, right? That's not. You can't really say that unless you are going to say, well, I'm reading between the lines, and this is what you read between the lines. This is what it really is saying. The wise mourn neither for the living nor for the dead. All right. You utterest vain words of wisdom. All right. Okay. Let's see what Srila Prabhupada says. The Supreme Personality of Godhead said, keep in mind that Supreme Personality of Godhead, right? Keep that in mind. So that's what he has for śhrī-bhagavān uvācha. So he translates Bhagavan as the Supreme Personality of Godhead. While speaking learned words, so he uses learned words. You are mourning for what is not worthy of grief. Those who are, so he uses mourn and grief, both words here. And he also uses lament. He uses all 3. Those who are wise lament neither for the living nor for the dead. So he actually has a good solution. He has, while speaking learned words, you are mourning for what is not worthy of grief. That is a good solution, actually. While you're speaking learned words. Let's see. Prajñā. I don't know if prajñā, learned is a good word for prajñā, though, But even if he used, while speaking words of wisdom, you were mourning for those who should not be mourned. That's actually what I have as well, right? So the implication is, I think that's the right word here. Implication is, in the verse, seems to be that you're mourning or you're grieving while speaking words of wisdom, and that's you're contradicting yourself, because you're pretending that you're wise. You seem to be wise, but you're mourning, and that's not wise. Or you're grieving, that's not wise. All right, let's go on. Śhrī-bhagavān said, this is Jeffrey Armstrong now, who's also in the Hare Krishna camp, I believe, as far as I understand, but I could be wrong, but he's coming out of that tradition. The words you speak appear to be full of profound meaning, but those who are wise do not grieve for those who are breathing or whose breath is gone. So he must be using, so he's a Sanskrit scholar, so he is probably picking up on something in the Sanskrit there. We're not going to go into it, but he sees something about breathing, maybe. The words you speak appear to be full of profound meaning. So prajñā has profound meaning, but those who are wise do not grieve for those who are breathing whose breath is gone. So he has appear, right? You appear to be saying some good things, but you're not really, right? You're not really wise. But that's a paraphrase. That's again, reading between the lines. That's importing into the text something that's not actually there. Jayadaya Goyanka Kita Press. Śrī-bhagavān said, Arjuna, you grieve over those who should not be grieved for, and yet speak like the learned. Again, prajñā and learned, I'm not sure if that's the best translation. Wise men do not sorrow over the dead or the living. It also doesn't say you speak like the learned, right? If it had said that, it would have used a word like eva, but it does not use eva there. Or iva, however you say that. Anyway, we'll go on. He uses the word grief. He uses the word sorrow. He does not use the word mourn or lament. Sri Purohit Swami, Lord Shri Krishna said, so he's translating Bhagavan as Shri Krishna, why grieve for those for whom no grief is due and yet profess wisdom? So another question, right? He's making it a question. The wise grieve neither for the dead nor the living. This is like Juan Mascaro. He's making it into a question. Why grieve for those for whom no grief is due and yet profess wisdom? The wise grieve neither for the dead nor the living. It's a nice solution to the problem. Because again, you don't have any punctuation in the text. So what's to say that it's not a question? Maybe it is a question. But when most people are not making it into a question, then you have to question those who would make it into a question, I would say, right? There's something to be said for the consensus view. Parama Karuna Devi, the glorious Lord said, although you speak wisely, you are lamenting for something that should not make you sad. Those who really know the truth do not grieve for the dead or for the living. She's using the word lamenting, which I said was probably the best word. But she's also using the word grieve. She's also acknowledging that it does say you speak wisely, right? But she's saying, although you speak wisely, right? There's no although there, right? That's the thing. That's the problem. It doesn't say yet. It doesn't say although. It says cha. Cha is usually and, right? And you speak words of wisdom. So that's why there's a problem, right? There's clearly a difficulty in translation, and everyone here is trying to come up with a solution. Although you speak wisely, so she's putting the although, right? You speak wisely, although you speak wisely, but you are not acting wisely. Oh, I had Swami Gambhirananda already. All right, I don't know why I had it twice. All right, Swami Mukundananda, the Supreme Lord said, while you speak words of wisdom, you are mourning for that which is not worthy of grief. The wise lament neither for the living nor for the dead. So he's acknowledging also that speaking words of wisdom, right? You speak words of wisdom. I was thinking of, the Beatles, Paul McCartney, Let It Be, right? Speaking words of wisdom. Right? Mother Mary comes to me. You speak words of wisdom. Maybe Paul was influenced by one of these translations. He read one of these translations, picked up the Gita one day and saw, speak words of wisdom. You speak words of wisdom. And he's like, great line, I'm gonna use that. Or maybe subconsciously it somehow crept in, and he woke up with a song in his head, and it was partly influenced by the Gita. Who knows? Anyway, Swami Mukundananda, good one. He actually had most of the time. Swami Mukundananda does not have the greatest translation in my humble estimation, but this one actually was pretty close to what it actually says. He also uses mourning, grieving, and lament all there. Google Translate, put it into Google Translate. The Supreme Personality of Godhead said. So this is interesting because this shows you that Google Translate has Bhagavad Gita as it is in it, because why would it translate śhrī-bhagavān as the Supreme Personality of Godhead? It's probably doing that because it has it's using Bhagavad Gita as it is by Prabhupada. And that's why you have to question Google Translate. You do not grieve for the unworthy, and you speak words of wisdom. The wise do not grieve for the dead and the living. So he's actually right in saying the dead and the living, because that's what it says. It doesn't say nor the living. It doesn't say neither the dead nor the living. It says the dead and the living. You do not grieve for the unworthy, and you speak words of wisdom. So Google Translate has just, and you speak words of wisdom, right? That's what it says. And you speak words of wisdom. You do not grieve for the unworthy. But the first part is weird, right? So anyway, it's interesting to see what Google Translate had there. Sir Edwin Arnold, we're going to end with this one. Krishna, thou grievest where no grief should be! Exclamation point. Thou speakest words lacking wisdom. For the wise in heart mourn not for those that live, nor those that die. The wise in heart is an addition. Pandita. Most people would not translate pandita as wise in heart. You speak words lacking wisdom. So he's putting that in there because he's like, this is what Krishna really meant to say. He should have said this, right? It doesn't say this, but this is what he meant. Anyway, let's go back to the beginning. Let's read it one more time. And we'll see what we can conclude here. śhrī-bhagavān uvācha. aśhochyān-anvaśhochas-tvaṁ prajñā-vādānśh-cha bhāṣhase. gatāsūn-agatāsūnśh-cha nānuśhochanti pandits. śhrī-bhagavān. How do you translate śhrī-bhagavān? Maybe you don't have to translate that. Uvācha, said or spoke. You have mourned. Anvaśhocha-tvaṁ. Tvam is you. Anvaśhocha, you have lamented. You are lamenting. You are lamenting. You are grieving. Aśhochyā, those who should not be lamented or should not be grieved for, while speaking words of wisdom. Remember, Google Translate has "and speaking words of wisdom." That's really what it says literally, not while. It doesn't say while. While is a is to explain, is explanatory, is a way of saying this is what Krishna really meant. But it doesn't say that, right? So this is where this is difficult, you know. The wise pandits grieve neither for the living, agatāsūn, nānuśhochanti, nor for the dead, gatāsūn-cha. Now, it literally says the wise, or the pandits, however you translate that, do not grieve for the not living, and for the do not grieve for the living and for the dead. Does not say nor, right? It does not have neither nor. Has and, right? Let's read Winthrop Sargent one more time. The Blessed Lord spoke, you have mourned those that should not be mourned, and you speak words as if with wisdom. So he adds in the as if there. The wise do not mourn for the dead or for the living. All right. I hope this is helpful. He actually changes the word order just slightly there at the end. It actually says the living and for the dead. Or for the dead. It really is living and for the dead, or nor for the dead. So anyway, hope this is helpful. I think there's a dichotomy, a discrepancy that Krishna is pointing out in Arjuna, which is that Arjuna is saying, I think he's kind of, maybe, if I may be so bold as to say, he's calling Arjuna on his BS. He's saying to him, look, you're saying all these things, but I can see that you're very upset, right? And so you're probably trying to rationalize why you don't want to fight, right? You're trying to get out of this because you're very upset and you're very in a state of grief. You're paralyzed by grief right now, you're coming up with rationales for why you shouldn't fight. But you're not in a place of wisdom, because if you were in a place of wisdom, you would not be grieving, and you would be thinking more clearly, and you would not be coming up with rationales for why not to fight. I think that's kind of the gist, perhaps. I would love to hear your thoughts. I'd love to hear your commentary on this particular verse. There's definitely more to say about all this, but I think 30 plus minutes is probably enough. And if you did listen, as always, I'm going to ask, why. But if you did listen, thank you so much, and I would love to hear something from you. Please feel free to leave a comment, question, suggestion, anything like that. And as always, I'm going to end with Hare Om Tat Sat. God, ain't that the truth? All right. See you soon.